I apologize, I don't speak Russian, so please forgive me for that. But as our distinguished host mentioned before we met, I said we need to enhance the mutual knowledge of languages between the Arab world and Russia. We need to teach Russian in the Arab world more aggressively and to teach Arabic in this part of the world. And let me say why, although this is not the subject of our discussion today. But I like to take this opportunity. I am a student of the global economy. The world is changing very rapidly. You may not see it, but for somebody like me whose full-time job is to look at the world is changing geopolitically, financially, and technologically. For example, all of a sudden, and in few years, Russia became the largest producer of oil in the world, whereas it was ranking 4 or 5 or 6 in the past. At the same time, China became the largest importer of oil in the world. These are very significant changes. China took over as the number 2 global economy. It is now second only to the United States of America. And at the rate of growth in China and the rate of no growth in the United States, in less than 10 years, China will be the number 1 economy. This is major change. And I happened to attend a meeting similar in a place in Washington, similar to this, called the National Science Academy. And it was a seminar on the future of the world. And it was the consensus of all the experts from all the agencies that power is economic power. And once you are the superpower economically, you automatically become the superpower politically. All you need to work for if you want to become the superpower, full stop, is to become the superpower economically. Is everything I'm saying clear? Yeah. Or am I speaking too fast? No, I'm sorry, if I ask this question. Anyway, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I want to say that there are 5 emerging forces in this world who will become the power engines of the future. China, India, Russia, Brazil, and the Gulf countries, the GCC. GCC countries because of the oil, particularly. That region, including Iraq, has the largest pool of oil in the world. And as a result, they will have a lot of surplus funds. Now, I think Russia has a major role to play in Europe, I fully understand. But it should also look at the Arab world with equal importance. Europe needs you, needs Russia, we know that. It needs your oil, your gas, your surplus funds, etc., and your natural resources. That is understandable. The Arab world needs you for technology, and you need the Arab world as a rich partner. It's not only good to have partners who need you. It's also good to have partners who are equally well doing like you are, so that you add to your strength. So I believe that, and I'm sure I heard the president, your president, this morning at the opening, and maybe you heard him. And I could see his focus on the CIS countries, which I understand. But he also mentioned that we should look at the world. And when he says we should look at the whole world, I would like to see the Arab world included, because the Arab world needs you and you need the Arab world. So enough of that. Let me go back to a general discussion on the process of development. When we talk about development, people think automatically of economic development, unfortunately. And when they talk of economic development, they talk of the macro indicators, the rate of growth, the rate of the inflation, etc. But there are no indicators that address the social development. There are no universally agreed indicators. Many research centers and universities have developed indicators to measure the impact of the economy on you as a person. You can say that there is growth in the economy, but the people are getting poorer. And that is something I think I will be talking about tomorrow at the session where we look at the human aspects of modernization. I'm speaking here at the panel tomorrow at 2:30 in this afternoon. I'm chairing the panel on the human aspects of development. That is something in general. But let me go back to development. The World Summit in 2000 decided to set targets for the world to become a better world in the year 2015. 2000 to 2015. We are now in 2010. And there was a meeting last month at the UN to review the progress. And there was a realization that the world is not progressing as much as it should in achieving the development goals, which were set as 8 goals. And each of these 8 goals has targets, sub-goals. But they cover education, health, environment, poverty, gender, youth, etc. All the aspects of human development. This is how and why UNGAID was created. We were created by a decision of the World Summit on Information Society in order to see how we can help as the only multi-stakeholder organization under the United Nations. Because the United Nations is an organization of governments. But we are not an organization of governments. We are an organization of governments plus private sector, plus academia, plus civil society. So we are unique in that respect because we bring all the stakeholders together. Now, since I took over from my predecessor, who laid the foundation for GAID 3 years ago, Mr. Craig Barrett, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Chairman of Intel Corporation, I took over this year, and based on what we have done, and I was serving with him as his vice chair. So what we developed is we need to focus on something. So our focus has been decided now and approved by the Secretary General on one specified and defined mandate, and that is how to use information, technology, and telecommunication to advance the achievement of development goals. So we are now concentrating on this, and I'm very delighted and honored to be here with my colleague, who is your countryman, Mr. Sergei Kambalov, who is the chief executive of this organization. He is the chief of staff. He runs the operation under me as chairman. But in fact, he is responsible for running the operation day to day and in overall aspects. So you should be proud that we have a Russian who is in charge of this operation. Now, having said that, I would like to focus on the fact that we believe, as many of the countries and experts said, that what we're doing is actually overdue. Because, in fact, in the Millennium Development Goals themselves, in Goal 8, Target 8 of Goal 8, states specifically that the development process can be advanced more effectively through the use of ICT and in partnership with the private sector. And this is the definition of United Nations Global Alliance for ICT on Development, which I chair and represent here today. So this is what we're doing in general and very briefly. And I would like to stop here and ask you for any questions if you have. If you don't have any questions, I will ask questions.
He's a professor, he can.
Yes, because I am used to being with students, because my grandchildren, not children, grandchildren are your age. So and you know, the grandchildren are very close to the grandfather. So I spend a lot of time with my grandchildren and I talk to them. And they are very, very outspoken and very effective. And I'm sure you are, but you are just trying to think what you want to say. So don't think, just ask any question in the world. Ask me why my necktie is blue, for example, anything. Ask why do I have mustaches. You can ask any question. Just ask.
I have a question, of course.
You don't qualify as a great grandchild.
Unfortunately. As far as we know, G20, sorry, it's a new format.
Yeah.
One of the major tasks of G20 was to do something with the system of audit.
Absolutely.
Banking audit.
You're correct.
And something was wrong with this tool. We had an article in Guardian 1 or 2 years ago, at the very beginning of the crisis. They said that ICT is responsible for the financial crisis. What do you think about this? And what is the reason of this stuff?
Of this crisis?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, but when you say that they say ICT is responsible, in one way it is true, because ICT made the crisis come so quickly because of the ability and the competence of information technology in speeding up. If this crisis happened 20 or 30 years ago, it wouldn't hit the world so quickly. It will take time, because with ICT, the world moves so fast that the impact is so fast and so drastic. But it is not responsible for the cause. It's responsible for making it proliferate so quickly. Now, that is on the crisis itself. But the cause of the crisis is obviously an American responsibility. And the responsibility in America does not rest with the government. This is not a plan by the government. It is not an act of the government, no. Unfortunately, it's a stupid act by a group who considered themselves to be geniuses in the financial markets. They used to call it the creativity of the financial markets. And they invented what is known as derivatives. The derivatives are financial documents which have been transacted and which are useless, worth nothing. And they have been sold. For example, you sell a house on a mortgage, you insure the mortgage against settlement, and you sell the insurance from one person to another at a higher price. You are selling the risk, and then you collect all of these insurance policies, you form a company with shareholders, and you issue shares on a risk, and there is no asset. Now, the World Bank, one of the World Bank organization, which is called Bank of International Settlement, BIS, estimates that the value of these false papers, which they call toxic papers, toxic assets, because they are dangerous and fictitious, they estimate that they are worth in the market $500 billion. And you must ask me, what is a quadrillion? This is a new term. We started with 1 million, then went to 1 billion, then 1 trillion, which is 1,000 billion. A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion. You know, the world is growing not only in size and population, but also in figures and numbers. So they had to invent a new term called quadrillion, which is 1,000 trillion. And the value of these fictitious assets, as you know, the richest man in the world is called Warren Buffett. And he said these derivatives, these papers, are assets which have no value, sold by a person who doesn't own any value to a person who doesn't have any value. So it is a worthless document by a worthless person to a worthless person. And it's a very complicated story, and it's impossible for the US to solve this problem. This is still there. This problem, that's why I also claim, and I say it publicly, that unfortunately the American economy has to deal with this issue sometime. Because these papers are still there, owed by somebody. Somebody owes somebody money for something which is not there. And it has to be resolved. This cannot evaporate. So anyway, what I wanted to say is we have a problem here that is very serious, very major. Why it's major? Because the total economy of the world, the total GDP of all countries of the world is 60 trillion. The economy, the global economy is 60 trillion. And when you have worthless financial documents of 500 trillion, you can see how serious is the problem. Now, this is about the cause. Now, coming to the G20, I fully agree with you, and I've been studying the G20 resolutions very carefully, particularly the London meeting of the ministers of finance, which focused on the role of the accounting profession, with which I agree. I served on all the boards of the accounting profession globally. The International Federation of Accountants, I was on its board. The International Accounting Standards, I was on its board. The International Auditing Standards, I was on its board. I also chaired the International Professional Standards Board. I chaired the United Nations Reporting and Financial Standards Board. So everything that has to be with accounting, I was on its board. And I've always complained that the accounting standards are wrong and inadequate. And I complained at these meetings, but unfortunately, I was one between 15 on the board. And all the 14 didn't like what I said because it will upset what exists. For example, when you talk in the financial statements about valuation of assets at fair value, what is fair value? This is ridiculous, because even there is no fairness in this world in anything. So how can you expect to be there a fair value? And the problem, for example, with the stock market and with financial market, is they use the value of trading, the price of trading for valuing assets, stock assets, shares in the market, which is ridiculous. A share can be issued at a value of $1 through process of speculation. It can become $50, but the asset value is still $1. But you buy it and sell it for $50. So I've always argued that the valuation of shares should be based on the net worth, which is the capital, divided by the number of shares, not on fair value. That is the fair value if you want to be fair. So anyway, the global community asked the accounting profession, the group of 20, asked the profession to develop new standards so that this crisis cannot happen again, because the crisis is partially due to the failure of the accounting standards. For example, I asked for an environmental standard, and I developed an environmental standard. I was chairing, one of the things I didn't mention is I chaired a commission by the UN Secretary, Kofi Annan at that time, to develop an environmental accounting standard, how to calculate the responsibilities of governments in violating the environment and how to make them responsible for their violation of the environment. It was not adopted. Everybody refused it, because if we apply that standard, all of the, what we call the seven sisters, the oil companies would go bankrupt because of their responsibility for environment. So there is a problem of accounting standards. Unfortunately, what is happening now is partial solutions. What they are talking about is stress tests, for example. Like you do a test for your heart, you call it the stress test. The G20 asked for developing stress tests for banks and financial institutions to see how they are able to meet a crisis, whether it's a liquidity crisis or a collapse of the market crisis or an asset valuation crisis. And we developed, actually, my firm and my capacity, I'm also the chairman of the Arab CPA Association. So as Arab CPA Association, we developed standards and programs to measure all the failures in companies, including failure in valuation of assets, in taking provisions for bad debts, and in taking liquidity ratios into consideration. This is one of the main reasons. The American government allowed leverage up to 20%, which means you can lend 20% your capacity to lend. And some banks were lending 100 times their capacity. When you lend 100 times your capacity to lend, you are bound to have a trouble. Because if only one of your clients fails, you lost your capital. So this is a serious problem in the fact that the rules and regulations, and that is why the Minister of Finance, who is called in the US Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Geithner, proposed a reform plan to change the rules of the American economy to become more controlled. The Americans have always been promoting complete laissez-faire, no control of the economy, which is wrong. The government's responsibility is to control. And the responsibility of the government is to lay regulations and rules to ensure that there is discipline in the market. You cannot, as they used to say in America, the market will control and organize and regulate itself. Nonsense. Like we have control over health programs, over education, we must have control over the economy. So until the United States of America approves a serious reform in its economic policy, we will not see an end to this problem. Sure.
Mr. Ghazali, in your opinion, is there any risk of double depreciation nowadays?
This is a very good question. What happened so far, and I know I am on record, so I take responsibility for what I'm saying. So far, we have had only the financial crisis. As of next year, 2011, the world will go into the economic crisis, which is much more serious. What happened during the first crisis and why it was being contained is because the American and Western countries pumped so much liquidity into the market to save the companies, and by doing so, they became the problem. So what you see in Europe and in the US of America is that the problem was transferred from the private sector to the government. So governments now have budget problems, governments have serious balance of payment problems, governments are having a problem of settling their debts, and when a company goes bankrupt, the company liquidates and pays back its shareholders and they go home. Governments do not go bankrupt except in one way: when they become unable to provide the services required to their citizens. This is the definition of bankruptcy in government. When the government is unable to provide the social security, the education, the health programs, etc. And what we are seeing in Europe and in the United States is shrinking of services. Most of the pension funds are gone because they loaned the private sector to save the private sector. The inter-debt situation between the European countries is very dangerous. Every country in Europe lent the other country, and neither of the two countries can pay the other. And it is estimated that on average there is $1.5 trillion owned by any of the European countries, whether it's Greece or Portugal or France or whatever, or Italy. They're all having their problems. The problem is not being so serious in the US because the US holds the reserve currency, the dollar. And they have been printing dollars. They don't need to issue bonds. They don't need to call for a borrowing because they can print the dollar and pump it into the market. So the Americans have been pumping so much dollars into the market to save the economy. But what a real recession is when you have unemployment, and unemployment in all of the Western countries is over 10%. And don't look at the figures 6 or 7 or 8 which they publish. It's everywhere more than the real unemployment is over 10%. When you have bankruptcies, and this is going on every day, and will go on at a faster rate as of next year, because as I said, now they have been able to sustain the continuity of these companies by providing them with funds. You know what they call the incentives. The incentive packages which Obama did and which the Europeans did similarly were intended to provide companies with money so that they don't collapse. And they were buying them so that they don't go bankrupt. That is a problem. When you are unable to provide social services and the people start going into a revolt against the government like we are seeing in Europe, when you have inflation which is expected eventually to turn into deflation, inflation can easily become a deflation. And deflation is much more serious than inflation. When you have stocks there available to buy and nobody is buying, and the companies would stop producing, whether it's goods or services, and you go into a stagnation of the economy. So what I'm warning is, the whole world is talking about a recovery. There is no recovery. There is an end or a containment of the financial crisis, but there is a beginning of a serious economic crisis.
So may I ask you then a question connected with your answer?
With
If we're going to have the next stage of the crisis, so-called the economic crisis, what is the best way to get as much money from that?
It's very good. You will make a good businessman. You will make a good businessman. Now, what you need to do is, unlike what you are reading in the Western press, which I'm sure you are reading. Now, you have to realize what the
Don't
strategy...
believe to the textbooks.
No. No, you know, the strategic research centers in the US are talking about the fact that wealth is moving from the north to the south and from the east to the west. This is not me. This is studies of research centers. You have to start looking south and east. Unfortunately, the culture of the world so far has been to look up to the north, which is great. Look at the north, but not to just look up to the north only. You must realize that there are new regions of the world which are the future source of wealth. China has so far established 2,000 joint ventures in Africa. What are they doing in Africa? They are investing in commodities. In less than 20 years, China will become the empire of commodities. They will control the commodities market of the world, because they went to the source where the commodities are available and are investing in the future of commodities.
And I have also read a work when I was entering this very university about investing money, and it was in 2008. And I thought that Africa was the future leader as the goal for investing, which is going to be very perspective.
To the
very perspective to invest. And I was writing that work in 2008. And I guess if in what sector we should directly invest, if we, for example, speak about Russia, there are lots of mineral resources, there are lots of human resources. What is greater, there is a lot of territory, which is also very not pleasant, but which is also great to invest in.
Depends on how many millions or billions you have. You look like you own billions. Let me tell you what I think for somebody like you, with a brilliant mind. Invest in knowledge.
In knowledge?
Knowledge creation.
I did not expect this.
Knowledge creation. The 10 richest people of the world are not in oil, not in banking, and not in real estate. They are knowledge workers, like Bill Gates. Information technology and information creation will be there with us for at least 100 years. Particularly if you talk about artificial intelligence. If I were you, and I had this, I was privileged to be with Bill Gates on a panel discussion 10 years ago. And I asked him, what do you think in the next 100 years would be the most important future investment? And he said artificial intelligence. This is not me. I'm learning from the greatest knowledge creator. And that's what he is. He's a knowledge creator. He's a knowledge worker. And he calls himself knowledge worker. Now, artificial intelligence is only one discipline. I'm not just focusing on that. All fields of knowledge creation, including telecommunication in its various aspects, we are lagging in telecommunication. Unfortunately, telecommunication now is the problem, not information technology. Information technology is far faster than telecommunication. And telecommunication, and I'm not talking about mobile telephony, because mobile telephony is not telecommunication. It's a networking relationship. They like to talk about it as telecommunication. I'm talking about broadband. I'm talking about making accessibility universal telecommunication accessibility. And that we are far from that. And information technology is being retarded by the slow progress of telecommunication. Now that's one field, another field. Also, if you want to go to outside knowledge creation, which is whether it's in information technology or in telecommunication or in any innovation field, this particular region, the CIS countries, and of course Russia, is the wealthiest region in the world in natural resources. The richest country in the world is not the United States of America, and it's not China. The largest economy is US and then China. But the richest country in natural resources is Russia. You may not realize that you are born in the richest country in the world. All you need to do is how to explore and transform this potent wealth into real wealth. But that is where you should look. You know who invented the Yahoo? You know? How was the Yahoo invented? Two students like you.
Google.
No, Yahoo.
Yahoo Chinese guy.
No. Yahoo. Two students.
Yahoo?
Yeah, two students like you were sitting in an apartment. They shared an apartment. And they couldn't find a job. They were looking for a job and they couldn't find it. So they started to play on their computers to invent something. And they invented the Yahoo. And they became one of the richest people of the world, two of the richest people of the world. So there is no monopoly on wealth in this knowledge age. You can be the wealthiest person, and I thank our distinguished ambassador for introducing me. I think he mentioned our ability, our leadership in many fields. But we are now the largest intellectual property company in the world. And we come from the developing world. We're not even in the developed. We're not in the group of 6 nor 7 nor 8 nor 20. But we have been able to realize that we can become leaders. But how? We became leaders because we used information technology in intellectual property. The Americans were in charge and control and the most important leaders in intellectual property. But intellectual property protection is usually a lawyer's job. And lawyers are not very good IT people. And they don't like IT. So we decided to be the reverse. We wanted to be an IT law firm. So I recruited somebody, his name is Charles Shaban, just to mention the name. I said, Charles, I want you to run our intellectual property firm. He said, I don't know what intellectual property is. I said, that's why I want you to run it. He said, I don't understand. I said, what is your business? He said, I'm an IT expert. I said, that's why I want you. I want this IP firm to become an IT firm. So you go ahead and transform the firm to become completely IT-based and completely computerized. This is your job. That's how I want to run it. I want you to run it web-based. I don't want you to be a manager of a company. I want to be a web-based manager of a company. So we worked on a program which is unique in the world that made us the leaders in the world. And I started like you. When I started, I didn't have an office. I started from my own automobile car, which I rented. And I used to have my files in my car. When I started the firm, I couldn't afford the rent of an office. And I couldn't afford a car. So I was renting a car on a monthly basis. And I was running the business out of my car in 1972. Now it's much easier to run your business out of even no car and no office, because all you need, as Bill Gates says, is to be able to connect your computer. You can connect it from an internet cafe. You can connect it from university, from anywhere, and run and start the greatest business. Okay? Yes, madam.
You have mentioned the problem of innovation as well as high tech and public-private partnership. So what do you think of our project Skolkovo? In particular, it's
Project
Skolkovo.
Have you heard something about our
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley? Here?
Yeah, I told you.
I don't want to be, yes, I understand. I understand now. I didn't know what it is. But the Silicon Valley, I don't want to be criticizing.
So it's positive and negative side.
I don't want to criticize because I don't believe that. I think we are coming too late if we talk about Silicon Valleys. Because Silicon Valley was useful before the information technology revolution. Now you don't have to be in one place, which is a high-tech place, in order to develop high-tech technology. And it is probably better not to be in one place and to have your high-tech. You don't like what I'm saying because it's against the trend. But it's all right, I still say it, because I owe you to be honest. I owe you to be honest. The project, I have advised every government in the Arab world wanted to have a Silicon Valley. And I said, please, Silicon Valley was invented to invent the information technology revolution. But once that is there, you don't need to be in a building or a group of buildings, or in a village, and you call it a smart village or a Silicon Valley village. Look at the projects that they developed, which they call smart villages or Silicon Valley villages. They're nothing more than buildings which accommodate companies. But there is no Silicon Valley creativity going on there. And I know them all, whether in Dubai or in Cairo or everywhere. It's a village where we have companies, where major companies have their headquarters. But the creativity and the work is not there. So I would not recommend to my governments, the governments who ask for my advice, but I can be wrong. If the decision maker in Russia believes that he should have, then he knows better. And I don't know. I know about my part of the world, and I know that it doesn't work there. I know you didn't like what I said.
No.
You didn't like the fact that I said it.
We are not responsible for this money.
Good day. I have a question concerning my research.
I don't think it works.
I have a question concerning my research, which deals with national domain names.
With national
Domain names.
Ah, okay.
If you-
This is our business.
Maybe you can help me.
Well, this is one of our businesses. I can put you in charge, in contact with, because we are the only registrar, international registrar of domain names in our part of the world. We are an accredited global registrar, not for the Arab world. We registered domain names for American, French, everything. And we are asked by governments to help them in establishing their registry of domain names. And most recently, we are now, only this week, we have been asked by the United Arab Emirates to do what is called the sunrise
Of the internationalized.
of internationalized domain name, .emirates, .em. So we are managers of, we are a registrar of domain names. I can now, while I'm talking to you, I can ask my domain name to register any domain name you want online at this moment. If you want your own domain name, I can book it for you now.
That's not the answer. The question concerns the initiative for internationalized domain names.
Yes.
And my research is on the involvement of the governments in the governance of their national domains.
Okay.
Which is rather new tendency, because governments...
You want to put me in trouble. Okay, I will put myself in trouble. I have put myself in trouble so many times and survived so far. Okay. Yeah, I will answer your question.
Yes.
Yeah, finish.
So, today a lot of talk is about internationalized domain names and how they will help develop, proliferate the knowledge and the ICT in developing countries. But as far as I know, even the existing domain names, national domain names in English, for say some African countries, are not in use, not in active use, because of the low economic development. So what would be your comments or advice for the governments on introduction of internationalized domain names?
You mean multilingual domain name?
IDMs, yes, multilingual on national language.
Okay.
And maybe before proliferating new domain name space, there should be development of the existing domain space or of the infrastructure for the use of the existing domain space.
Okay, I'm very impressed that you know so much about domain names, but let me tell you what the problem is. We are grateful and we pray every morning to America for giving us the internet and the domain name system. And I say this always at conferences. I said it at the Internet Governance Forum in last year, which is the organization that was created to look at what you're talking about. It is true, the United States of America invented the internet. Although not really, because the French invented it before, and it was called Minitel. But the French, unfortunately, did not make it internationalized. They kept it for French use, internal use. We had an internet in France, but only for the French people. The Americans...
On TVs.
Yes, and on TV and in all telecommunication. Unfortunately...
It looks like a mammoth
in
this auditorium.
Yeah.
we can remember...
Minitel. Now, this was before you were born, of course, all of you. So, the Americans invented the internet. Now, who is running the internet? Everybody, I met with the leadership of the internet on many occasions, the chairmanships of the various chairs of internet consortium. And they say it mushroomed like this. But how did it mushroom? And after it mushroomed, who runs it? Now, the internet was invented by a consortium of universities in the United States of America jointly with the CIA and the Department of Defense. After it has been developed, the responsibility was moved from the Department of Defense to the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce now appoints the Internet Governance Body by a contract which is renewed every 5 years. Now, the Internet Management Body, not governance, the actual Internet Management Body is called, as you know, ICANN. ICANN is Internet Consortium for Assigned Names and Numbers, as you know. ICANN is appointed by a contract from the Department of Commerce. Therefore, the boss is the Department of Commerce. But ICANN is only responsible practically for domain name registration. They have no responsibility, other responsibility over the internet. Now, the responsibility for domain name registration, and I visited, not ICANN, because this is a huge network of interested parties. At San Jose, they have the International Registry of all domain names. In a small building, highly secure, every domain name is stored. So all the domain names of the world are stored in one little building in San Jose, California. It is not up to you or up to me to decide on domain name systems. The Internet Governance Forum is a forum. And for your information, I chaired the first meeting which established the Internet Governance Forum when I was at that time the co-chair of the ICT Task Force of the United Nations. And we organized the Internet Governance Forum. It was an Internet Governance Forum in Berlin. And out of that meeting, we proposed to the Secretary General to establish an Internet Governance Forum. But that is only a forum. It has no responsibility, no authority to do anything with the internet except talk and propose and make recommendations. So, I have had a serious problem with ICANN in the Arab world for multilingualization. They are dragging their feet. And I said this also in my public speech in front of the huge world audience, that unless the internet governing body, which is ICANN, can realize that they have to move on multilingualization, we are going to see the fragmentation of the internet. Because you know who is the largest user of internet today? China.
Oh, in domain names?
China. There are 500 million Chinese users out of the total approximately 1.5 in the world. And they are twice as many as the US users. The Chinese have their own internet now, and it is in Chinese. So if and I said this to the Americans, the American decision makers, if you do not move fast on multilingualization, countries like my country, Arabic speaking, would say, okay, Mr. China, are you willing to multilingualize your internet? Because we want to join it. And if the Chinese, and I see that coming in 10 years, like I see you sitting in front of me, in 10 years, the Chinese are going to come up with a plan for multilingualization of their own internet, which will make it possible for any user in the world to use his own language on their own internet. Unfortunately, ICANN is moving very slowly, although the chairman of ICANN is a very nice young man. He's a very close friend of my son. And if he gets to hear this, he would complain about me to my son, because they are very close friends. They are both on the board of the Young Presidents Organization. And I know the man. He's very, very good man, very nice person. But it is not entirely up to him. And the process is moving very, very slow. I don't expect what you call internalization, nor the multilingualization to move very fast, because it cannot without the underlying technical rules, particularly applying to the root servers and to the technology at the base of the internet protocols, what we call. That is under the complete control of ICANN, and nobody can do it without their approval. And I'm not very hopeful that we are moving very fast. What we are seeing now is the approval of a certain domain name in a local language like Arabic but that what I'm talking about is multilingualization. And internationalization means I can use the internet in my own language exactly like the American uses it in English. For chatting, for direct access, for surfing, for searching, for everything. Now that is not happening and is not on the agenda to happen. I think you wanted to ask a question. So, no?
This year I took part in the competition. It was devoted to the main aims.
To
the main aims. And this competition was, the aim of this competition was to involve people in this process and to make government to think about these aims and to be respectful of these aims. And
Are you talking about domain names also?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I proposed two options, and it was devoted to the aims to alleviate the starvation.
The
starvation.
I didn't understand that word.
Starvation. Hunger. Hunger.
Hunger.
To alleviate the poverty. To alleviate the poverty in Africa.
Okay. Oh,
And
hunger.
And I gave two options to people. Two options. They were first, we can end poverty by two options. First of all, we can make everything by the year 2015, and the second, we can not do anything, and as a result, everybody will die. And that's why we don't to.
Was it a virtual game or it was? Or you took part in an experiment?
It was some blackboard. And I have a question. What message do you suppose can involve people to make a pressure on their government in order to solve this problem, first of all? And the second...
Problem of poverty?
Yeah, of poverty in Africa. The second question is it possible to alleviate the situation by 2015? And how it will influence the whole economy in the world if we help these Africans and if we help them to elevate their economy.
You're raising a very impressive humanitarian question, which I like. But I am one of those people who believe that in 25 years, Africa will become Europe of the world. I am not at all pessimistic about Africa. Africa is a country with tremendous resources. Africa is a country which is a virgin with its all capacities and capabilities. And while the Western world, particularly the developed countries, are going into a recession, you see in Africa a faster rate of growth. Obviously, the world should be ashamed of itself because it did not help Africa. Every year, the group of seven, the G7, met and decided on a number of billions, 5 billion, 2 billion, to help Africa, and nothing, very, very small amounts were invested in Africa. The world did not deliver on its promises to Africa. So the Africans are feeling that they have to do it on their own. And that is a good sign, because now they realize that the world is not willing to help them. And I like that, because one of the things I speak when I visit universities in my part of the world, and I talk to students, I have always one theme, and it is called the blessing of suffering. People who suffer are very lucky, because suffering teaches you a lot of things and make you a greater person. I suffered all my life until I made it. And I learned that suffering can help you, and it should not be seen as something that you should resent. Make use of your suffering. The Africans are making use of their suffering. And all of a sudden comes China, and China is investing in Africa in a low profile, without publicity, and without a lot of noise. You know, when the G7 would give any loan, they advertise it 20 times. They say we have decided, and then they say we established the committee, and then we established the procedure, and then we signed the agreement, and then we started delivering, and you think it is so many donations, but it's the same donation repeated. Now the Chinese are coming peacefully, without any words, and going into partnerships, and you will go into streets of Africa now and find people talking Chinese. Africa is becoming the partner of China, and China is, in a few years, the largest economy of the world, the largest surplus country of the world already. Already it is the #1 surplus country in funds, in surplus money. It's already that. And it is the largest country by population, by many other criteria, and the largest now exporter. So, and we have to remember that 500 years ago, China was 50% of world trade. So this is not very strange that we are seeing what is happening with the Chinese. What I'm saying is that Africa in 25 years will not be the Africa you're talking about now. Africa will be talking like any European country, in the language of technology, in the language of science, but still they are saying we need help, but they're not asking for help in money. They're asking for help in technology transfer, they're asking for help in joint programs, which is not coming, unfortunately. There has been a lot of promises, but very little delivered. But Chinese are delivering, and the Chinese, I think, are much smarter than the blue-eyed of the West, because the blue-eyed think that they can continue to control what they have, and they haven't learned the lesson from history that no empire ever stays forever. And I'm not inventing something. In March 2009, the Newsweek magazine, which you read, on the cover was the Capitol Hill upside down, and written, "This is how empires collapse." And it talked about the wrong economic policies of the United States of America and of Europe. I mean, I'm not only blaming the United States of America. This is a total mistake of the developed world, that they did not believe that they should go into partnership with the poorer world. They were giving charity sometimes, but they have not gone into investment into the developing world, particularly in Africa. The Chinese are coming with the reverse policy. They are now partners in Africa and in every African country. And for your information, they are now turning to South America. In South America, they have developed not only investments and not only markets, but they developed a currency market for their yuan. They give a loan to a South American country in yuan. They ask them to repay it in yuan, and they buy products from Russia in yuan. So there is a bilateral financial market being created. Now, unfortunately, 70%, and I say this because I love the West. I've been educated in the West. I live in the West. I love the West. Unfortunately, the West did not have the Chinese wisdom of 5,000 years. 70% of investments of Europe are direct investments, are in the US. And 70% of the US direct investments are in Europe. This is not healthy. The world is not just Europe and the United States of America to have all your investments between you. Diversify. Look at future economies. Look at future potentials. Look at now, and this is why when the American crisis, financial crisis hit America, it hit Europe. Because Europe is the partner of the United States of America, not Africa. And countries who are not partners of America have benefited from the crisis. Because they have not been impacted because they have no business relationship or financial relationship with America. Unfortunately, the question raises a very important issue, and that issue is of looking at the world. President de Gaulle is a very wise president of France. And I know in his office, I've seen his office, he used to have on his desk books of history and on the walls maps of the world. And he would tell everybody who comes to discuss a policy issue with him, he said, did you go to history and geography? You can never take an intelligent decision without taking consideration of history and geography. Unfortunately, the Western world, did not take into consideration neither geography nor history. And they thought that the whole world was Europe and the United States of America, and that the whole history was the history of the United States and Europe. Thank you very much.
Talal, you are great, as always.
I know when I speak, I'm very provocative. I make controversial statements. Many people don't like me to speak, but I do speak.
I hope that we can establish a kind of some joint researches in this field, and probably we can have some of your video lectures or something like this, because it's very interesting and it's very important for us to see the other side of this new economical geography.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.